Thank you and welcome. The topic of our presentation is rights at wrong end, the Kafala system. Kafala puts far too much power in the hands of employer or sponsor, as it is the root of abuses of the workers' rights wherever it is. Let's have the short history of Kafala. It's emerged with the discovery of oil and consequent development of the GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries of the Middle East. The system ties the immigrant worker to the kafil or sponsor. During 1950s to 2005, the GCC population grew tremendously from 4 million to over 40 million. 12.5 million of them being foreigners. Also, since 1950s, these countries have been receiving many refugees apart from this. So the population density has grown up substantially. All these affected the economy, social security, international relations, and immigration policies of GCC countries. So they began initiating strict nationality citizenship laws to restrict political, socio-economic rights of the immigrants and preserve their national identity. This paper is based on both primary and secondary sources of data. The primary data is collected as part of a research project of the Center for Diaspora Studies, University of Kerala. And the secondary data sources include reports and other materials of United Nations, International Labour Organization, and Council for Social Relations, CFR, etc. Let's see the key features of Kafala. Kafala is a totalitarian system where the kafil or the sponsor has total control over the employees. And the predatory recruiting practices are also involved in the system, where there may be usually a close unholy nexus between the sponsor and recruiting agents. And this is highly restricting. The system highly restricts the movement of and even communication of the people, the immigrant laborers. And the excess visa requirements and passport confiscations are instrumental in the limitation of their freedom. And in effect, it appeared to be forced labor in its features. And in addition to this, there is insufficient or non-payment of wages to the immigrant laborers. There occurs several kinds of debt bondages. And also, irregular residency status has also come along with this. All these put them, the immigrant workers, into a situation of turmoil. In addition to this, there is inhuman living and working conditions. A migrant worker's immigration status is legally bound to an individual or employer completely, or sponsor, who is called kafil, for their entire contract period. Migrant worker cannot enter the country, they cannot transfer employment, they cannot leave the country for any reason without obtaining explicit written permission from the kafil or sponsor. Kafil controls migrant worker by confiscating their passport and travel documents and other valid documents against the legislation. That is usually against the legislation prevailing in many of these countries. The power that the Kafala system delegates to the sponsor or the migrant worker make it a virtually or really contemporary form of slavery. Now we can see the table that shows the level of freedom, or the level of violation of rights of the immigrant labor across the GCC countries under the system of Kafala. This clearly shows that Saudi Arabia has everything now, from left to right. That shows that the immigrants in Saudi Arabia face this situation very much. Their rights are very much violated. And when you take the standard of contract, the domestic workers included in whether the domestic workers are included under the labor law, no countries in the GCC have that kind of provision. So the domestic workers are the most aggrieved people in the immigrant population of the GCC countries. And other factors, standard working contracts for all workers that only one country have, UAE has. And minimum wages, only Kuwait has minimum wages. All countries don't have. So in a nutshell, we can see this is a highly exploitative system that is prevalent, especially in the GCC countries. And when it comes to the primary case studies, you can see a person from the southern and the northern part of Kerala who worked in Saudi Arabia. What he says is, I migrated to Saudi Arabia during 2004 in search of a better paying job than here. I have been working as a mechanic in a motor garage in Riyadh. However, after I started working there, I realized that the pay was much not par with other similar jobs there. But I worked there for 3 years till my visa expired in 2007. I requested my sponsor for my passport to renew visa. Then I was informed that my passport was missing, as I was also instructed by the sponsor. I gave a new newspaper advertisement with regard to the missing passport. But later, I understood that my passport was not missing and was in the custody of the sponsor. Then I tried to change my employer, but couldn't succeed due to the sponsorship system, the peculiar system. All this forced me to continue the work on a low wage, as I did not have other options. So this is a typical situation where the immigrant labor face discrimination and exploitation. And another one, Mr. Shahjahan, who is from the southern part of Trivandrum, this Kerala state, he says, I migrated to Qatar in the early 2000s as a labor in a construction company. During this time, on an average, I had to work 10 hours a day. The wage was initially good, and unexpectedly, they reduced the wage. That affected most of us. The passport was with the company, so we couldn't leave the job or come back home. Then we came to know about several incidents of employees escaping from the worksite. Such practices were illegal. But continuing in such a scenario was even more vicious and dangerous. One day, some of my colleagues and I escaped. After escaping, we worked in another company without proper records. The wages was better. Since we were not regular employees, we couldn't claim any other benefits. But later, we were caught by the police and put in jail, and I could came back with support of some of the friends, not all the other people. And still, the system continues. So there are some factors that help the continuation of this system. The first is the low national foreign population ratio. The table shows that in almost all the countries have at least almost half or even more population are constituted by the foreign immigrant labor. So that always put them in a pressure to, or in a situation of much suspicion towards the people, the immigrant population. And the problem of xenophobia. Xenophobia is everywhere, especially against the immigrant population. That also put all this the pressure, all these the receiving countries to have more restrictive regimes to manage the immigrant labor. And come along with this, the issue of public safety. They also feel the problem of safety and security along with rapid increase in the number of immigrant labor. There are global criticism against this vicious system. There's demand for abolishing or reforming Kafala along with anti-racism protests that's happening across the world. The 2022 FIFA World Cup also sparked discussions on this. That is happening in Qatar because there is widespread development projects happening with regard to the FIFA World Cup in Qatar, and a lot of immigrant labor are employed here who are subject to massive violation of human rights. And we can see that the multinational organization, international organization like European Union, UN, they have criticized the Kafala system, though none has taken any concrete measures to this in this regard. And some countries like Indonesia, Kenya, Nepal have even sometimes they barred their people from migrating to this GCC countries out of the question of this kind of massive violation of human rights. Kafala or the sponsorship system is a highly skewed administration of immigrant labor. That's visible across the globe, but is most visible in the GCC countries. Power and control of the kafils or sponsors over the immigrants are excessive as per all existing modern values, modern norms, modern laws, especially on human rights. Such restrictions are there in other countries across the globe, but the peculiar Kafala system excels them all in its violation of the freedom and rights of the immigrant labor. It really invalidates the workers and devoid them of decent conditions of work and working conditions. This has resulted in widespread protest from across the globe, especially from the human rights organizations. The international organizations have already told, they have also signaled their dissent against this, but they have not come out strongly against this maybe due to some other factors, geopolitics or some factors. And sometimes the dissent against this system even comes from the countries that even practice the system to some extent. Though the Kafala system is a complex system and the issues involved thereof cannot be solved through a single legislation overnight, some bold steps need to be taken towards elimination of this institutionalized regime of violation of human rights that amounts to slavery in modern era. So by this court, this is a complex area and cannot be addressed in one piece of legislation overnight. With this, let me conclude my presentation. Thank you.